Hello. In this final PowerPoint presentation, you are going to hear about some techniques for creating attractive visuals for your ECON3 unassessed presentation in class. Please note that the slides are not the most important part of your presentation, as the focus will be on your English and on your presentation skills, and approximately 3 to 4 slides per speaker are usually sufficient for group presentations. However, should you choose to use PowerPoint transparencies or other visuals, you do need to keep some things in mind. Just as a final reminder, here is the schedule for the presentation practice in Q2. So we are now currently in the final PowerPoint presentation practice, which is number 4, how to design an effective PPT. Here is a summary of the points we covered in the third PowerPoint presentation. They were about the one sentence takeaway. They were about the beginning, the middle, and the end of a presentation. So, what's the goal of your visual support? If you're aiming to make sure that your audience gets your message in the shortest possible time, then you need to remove any friction from the slides. So we're going to look at some following slides. There are two. I'd like you to ask yourself what is causing the friction in the slide and how can that friction be reduced? So, what's causing the friction in this slide? If you've answered that there is too much information or that there are too many bullet points, then you're right. You should include no more than 6 words per line and no more than 6 bullet points per slide. If you have more, the audience will have to use significantly more cognitive resources to understand your slide. What is causing friction in this slide? If you've answered that there are too many bullet points, then you're right. Remember, no more than 6 bullet points per slide. You need to think about distilling your ideas and distributing them more evenly. In the next slide, you'll learn what it means to distill and distribute. Take a look at the examples on the following slides. So, take a look at the following slides on global warming. Can the user experience, the UE, of the audience be improved? How can it be improved? Our first task is to make sure that the content has been distilled to its most concise and clear form. When designing your slides, you need to ask yourself, um, is anything repeated? Can I say something with fewer words? Would a picture make a better example than written text? Let's take an example of a typical slide one might present on climate change. Well, this is not the worst slide out there. It certainly can be improved. So let's walk through the process to distill it. First, make sure the slide only communicates one idea. Here, the point is that the ice is melting fast. So the presenter should eliminate anything unrelated, such as the human factors. They can go into the next slide. You want to keep this slide about the one overarching idea. Next, we need to eliminate the fillers. These include words like has or the. What are the most important words to keep? Simplified bullet points should look more like a newspaper headline. So we need to focus more on the content words, the verbs, the nouns, the adjectives, the adverbs. Now you can see the information is much clearer and your audience will stay more attentive and more engaged. Remember that you don't have to write every word that you're going to say on your slide. And actually, I would strongly advise you not to read word for word what is on the slide. Obviously, we can anticipate that our audience will be doing this themselves. After you've deleted unnecessary words, think about distributing. Can you spread your points across multiple slides? Again, the goal is to have one idea per slide. For the ECON3 unassessed presentations, you don't need so many slides, but that does not mean that you should try to cram all the information you possibly can onto one slide. A greater number of clearer slides is significantly better than a small number of overcrowded slides. So let's refer back to the climate change slide. First, do we need the heading here? We use them in every slide because that's the default format in PowerPoint. But from a design perspective, however, their large type of headings draws the eye. And since it stands out, audiences subconsciously assign more importance to it than the rest of the slide. So while the heading is important, it doesn't need to be on every slide. Separate it onto its own slide. Subsequent slides that fall under this section don't need reminders of the heading. So here, the heading for this section of the presentation is given its own slide. So now that the header is in its own slide and it's been eliminated from the rest, but we're not done. Next, let's tackle the bullet points. Is it necessary to display all three facts on one slide? For every bullet point, every sentence, And every word you put on a slide, ask yourself if it can be referenced out loud instead. Often it can. When audiences are forced to read on-screen text and listen at the same time, their auditory and visual channels compete to absorb information, and people tend to lose focus. This is known as the redundancy principle. So let's try and distribute each bullet point into its own slide, like the following slides will show. By now, you've made tremendous progress simply by distilling and distributing. So your presentation now looks something like this. However, by paying attention to contrasting colours, contrasting backgrounds, your slide could now look like this. Each of the 3 bullet points on an earlier slide are distilled and distributed into their own 3 slides, each with one piece of information. Here is the first one. Here is the second. And finally, here is the third. Remember this simple equation for working memory. 1 plus 1 equals 0. Text sentences plus speaking at the same time equals nothing will be remembered. Think caveman-like speech. Do not dump complete paragraphs into your presentation. Some experts even say to avoid complete sentences. However, it's very important that you still remain grammatically correct. Focus on your key words and the most important concepts or ideas that you want your audience to take away with them. People have limited capacity for retention, and focusing on key points will make your presentation easier to digest. The bottom line here is, apart from a short citation or to briefly quote an author or researcher, never use the wording directly from textbooks or articles in your slides. Always paraphrase or reword to make your slides audience friendly. With TV documentaries, a narrator talks over the visuals. You are the narrator. You present, you narrate, and your slides enhance what you say, the visuals. The key word here is enhance. Slides aren't supposed to stand on their own. They're designed to make your point obvious. Audiences aren't reading on-screen text whilst watching documentaries on TV. What you hear and what you see are seamless. That's why presentation experts advise using more visuals and fewer words. Our brains process pictures faster than text. In fact, one study found it's as fast as 13 milliseconds. This is the picture superiority effect in full effect, so to speak. With visuals, we don't have to read the slide and listen to the speaker at the same time. Hopefully here, the faults in this slide are obvious. The same information from the previous slide is summarized here, and visually it is much clearer. Play around with the menus in PowerPoint to explore different design options that are available. You can see here how to click to add notes to your slides. So how can you make your slide clear and attractive and so the emphasis can be on your speech and your connection with the audience? There are numerous tools to use. Remember, only show what is necessary. Instead of including the whole table, only provide the column heading along with the rows of information that are most applicable. If you are working with data or a graph, make sure you eliminate any unnecessary labels. Simplify where possible. This goes back to the recommendation to distill information, in this case, the data. Do you need to present a graph, or can you sum it up with a single percentage? Do you need to present individual points of data, or can you describe trends? Taking the time to do this extra step often eliminates unnecessary information. This is the friction that we spoke about earlier, and it helps your audience focus in on the most important statistic. You can also simplify the data graphics themselves. For instance, with a pie chart, try to consolidate your data so that there are fewer divisions. The only slice that matters is the one that you want to highlight. Don't let the other slides clutter up your message. If you're showing a scatter graph, consider creating one that just shows the trend line instead of each and every data point. The first graph shown here is the default created in PowerPoint when you click on line graph. But there are a few problems here. The labels are really small. The lines can be distracting, the title is hard to read, and if the trend is what's important, then the points on the line aren't necessary. With the new and improved graph, the friction has been minimized by, first of all, recreating and enlarging the title, the legend, the vertical axis. Secondly, deleting the background lines. Thirdly, thickening the graph lines. And finally, displaying selected numbers for the vertical and horizontal axes. But also ask yourself, do you even need the slide heading? The dates in parenthesis are already indicated on the x-axis, you could just allude to the heading by saying out aloud, the trend over the last 10 years indicates that online course satisfaction could be better. Now, you don't need the rating label, and if you make one minor tweak, you don't even need the key. So here is the new super simplified slide. You could show this slide and then simply say, the trend over the last 10 years indicates that online satisfaction could be better. Now, you don't need the rating label on the vertical axis as the trends are labelled within the graph itself. Here's another top tip. You can't modify this graph as you found it on the internet, or it's from a financial report and it's in a PDF format. Basically, it can't be changed. However, only one line of data is relevant to your audience in your specific presentation. You can work with highlights for the data you cannot modify using several PowerPoint tools. Compose composition. Don't simply drop information into the template the way PowerPoint has it laid out for you as a default. Vary the slide composition. Create relationships. Use repeated design elements such as color, size, composition to make your slides harmonious. Match the color of the text with the image color, the alignment, the proximity, the balance. PowerPoint is full of excellent design ideas, and you can use these to make your slides more attractive. Simply click on the word design in the toolbar as shown, and you will get plenty of suggestions for how to design your slides. You may also prefer to use Canva rather than PowerPoint. There are many tutorials available on YouTube. It's important to pay attention to the transitions between your slides and between the different parts of your presentation. This way the audience will get a sense of where you are. You can do this in a very visual way, as seen here in this slide, but you also need to pay attention to specific language you need to use in order to make smooth transitions. In this slide here, the audience can clearly see that the speaker is moving on to the third part of their presentation. This is a more visual way of showing the different stages and sections of the presentation. So here are some practical details for your unassessed presentation. So the duration of the presentation. So each group is allowed 30 minutes for their presentation. In groups of 3, each speaker can give a prepared speech of approximately 3 to 5 minutes. If you are in groups of 2, I would say 6 to 8 minutes. The remainder of the time is devoted to the questions and answers. So half of your presentation should be enough for the Q&A. The topic can come from one of the themes of the English course book, or from something you are learning about in your faculty courses, or from the economics themes that are being discussed in the news at the present time. There's a lot of choice. Here are some useful tips for the format of your presentation. The use of visual support, such as posters or slides, graphs, maps, PowerPoint, Prezi, and or the use of a short video or audio extract, approximately 60 minutes, is strongly recommended. Try to be as original and creative as possible. Do not simply list facts, but find an angle on the topic that that you find interesting for everybody. Include your personal opinion and analysis. The audience should be considered during the presentation and given a chance to make comments, ask questions, and give their opinion. Each presentation will be followed by a 10-minute debate or Q&A session on the general topic of your presentation. This is not negotiable. I feel that this is a very important part of a presentation. The presenters will run the debate and you can have some questions prepared for the audience. However, the whole class is expected to join in by sharing their ideas and opinions. It will be the presenter's job to make the presentation lively and interesting for the audience. Failure to engage the audience, as evidenced by their lack of participation in the debate, is negative. Here is a summary of some of the important points to keep in mind when preparing your presentation. And finally, all the experts will tell you that no matter how good your ideas might be, you have to rehearse your presentation. Practice your presentation in front of a mirror. Record yourself. Ask a friend for feedback. Record your speech as an audio file and listen to it repeatedly. Go to the resources for each skill area tile on the UV, check out the presentation skills for self-study and pick up some more tips from the experts. And here is a summary of the points that have been covered in this presentation. What's the goal of your visual support? Remember to distill, distribute, and avoid unattractive slides. So now over to you. We would like you to pick an example of game theory from real life. Remember to pay attention to the visual aspects of your presentation and use the criteria in the checklist for presentation practice 4. You will do the presentation live in class. Good luck.